Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric with a brand new National Park battle. This one is going to be quite tough because I have two of my absolute favorite parks going head to head. This is the beautiful Alaskan parks, Lake Clark and Katmai. Both of these parks are very, very remote. Few people go to them. So you won't find a whole lot of videos about Lake Clark or Katmai. And I know for a while I was saying I would make a Katmai review, but it just never ended up happening. I never got around to it, got busy with the theme park channel. But now I will be reviewing it in the form of a park battle. I'll be comparing Lake Clark and Katmai, determining which one I think is overall better. However, I think both are absolutely amazing and worth going to. Before we get into this battle, subscribe to the channel so you know when new park battles and other videos come out. Now let's begin with some basic information about each park. Both of these parks are in sort of southern Alaska. They have coastal regions and mountain regions, so that is a start. Personally, I think these are both top 5 parks in the country. Out of 61 I've been to, that is amazing. So top 5, very hard to choose one. But let's begin by talking about Lake Clark. So this park is named after one large freshwater lake with a lot of mountains surrounding it. There are many other lakes in the park though, and there isn't really a standout attraction here to do because it's not the most recreation-based park. You just have one hike or two, and you fly or boat everywhere you want to go. And there isn't really a huge standout thing like you would see at Denali. Katmai does have one thing people go for. They go for the bears. Brown bears fishing at the Brook Camp area, that's a really cool sight. However, it is far from the only thing to see here. If you fly through the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, which shows tons of volcanic ash remnants from an eruption that was about a century ago, you can also see Mount Katmai, which is a volcano, tons of lakes, and then there are waterfalls, rivers, and all sorts of other scenic views in both of these parks, along with wildlife besides bears. Comparing these two parks is such a challenge. I think I really need to just go through my experiences in each one and kind of talk about what makes each one great. So flying in to Port Allsworth Lake Clark was the start. This flight, on its own, was breathtaking. The mountains are huge. There are so many glaciers. You're above rivers, lakes, all sorts of different scenery. You can even see a few animals in the plane if you look closely. That day, we did not do a ton on Lake Clark, but we did see the lake and Tenalian Mountain, which is a pretty interesting sight. The following day, this is when we hiked Tenalian Mountain. I've talked about this trail before. It is one of the most beautiful, but also one of the most strenuous I've done. I dare say most strenuous, as it's incredibly narrow pathways going up a mountain ridge, and honestly, you are very likely to get injured if you're not a super experienced hiker. So it is a really beautiful hike though, and I say the view to the top was worth all of the frustration and pain that you can go through. It's a stunning view of lakes, rivers, and mountains of all different colors. So this trail is the one that you can do in Lake Clark essentially. There's a different part that splits off to a waterfall, which is also nice that we did. And there's one other small nature trail in a different area of the park, but that's really it in terms of self-guided recreation here. The next day we went to Katmai. Katmai is very different because this one, where we went, was all about the bears. It is a very fascinating sight. You may walk up to the large viewing platform thinking a couple things. Maybe you think, I'm sure it's not going to be that cool. The big thing for us is when we arrived, we initially saw one bear, which is definitely less than typical for the area, but the weather was not the nicest when we went. We eventually saw many more. And even though the boardwalks got pretty crowded, and it was rainy at times, it was an incredible sight. We saw many bear cubs, male bears, female bears. At one point, a large male came and scared away cubs, and we all got kind of sad, but it was a really cool sight to see. My favorite part was when this one cub just kind of went up, ripped half of a fish off, and walked away with it, leaving the mother and other 2 cubs to just have that little bit of fish. Seeing this take place is a really cool sight. Watching salmon jump up the river even is a really interesting thing as well. You can get cool pictures of them just kind of almost look like they're trying to fly. So when salmon are interesting, you know you got quite a park here. This area itself, in terms of scenery, there's a few mountains surrounding it, but it's not really a ton. But it's really all about the wildlife. You'll see bears and fish of all sorts. Some bears will run around. And because the bears kind of go anywhere they want here, it's definitely not any sort of domestication thing, and there's not a ton of fences everywhere. Just a few bear-proof areas. You might be told at some points to go inside because the bears seen near the campground are similar. It's very rare that there are any sort of accidents here. The guides are very good at keeping a safe distance from bears and making sure you do as well. But just know that if you are afraid of being too close to large animals, this place could be a little frightening for you. But for me, it's a very amazing sight. And you definitely want to see the brown bears if you go to Alaska. The next important thing was flying through Mount Katmai and the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. This is an unbelievable sight because it's a huge amount of volcanic ash covering this valley. So it's yellows and browns, and you can see a river carving through it. We were able to fly right around Mount Katmai even. You can look inside and kind of see a lake in Mount Katmai. It's a really interesting sight. Such a beautiful mountain, and I like mountain scenery more than anything else, so the size and scale of the Valley of 10,000 Smokes and the mountains around it, and some perfectly reflective lakes, was really interesting. We also, while from a plane, flew above caribou, moose, other bears, and even seals. I was unaware that freshwater seals lived in the lakes in this area, but they do. So that was a really fascinating sight. And that is pretty much what we did in Katmai. You don't do a ton of going out of your vehicle and walking the long hikes or going into certain recreation. The park is remote, and it's really you're going with guides, and you do what you're allowed to do with them. But you know what? This park really proves that recreation is not everything because it is beautiful just the way it is. Seeing these mountains alone makes Katmai one of the best national parks. Lake Clark, we did more than this though. We did go to the Cook Inlet, where there are often brown bears, and this wildlife sighting truly rivaled Katmai. There were just as many bears, I would say, in the area, maybe a few less, and they're across a river, so it's not quite as close as personal, but what we did find, by accident, was a wolf just standing not too far from us at all. We were probably just barely out of the recommended area. I just looked to the right, see the wolf, and our guide realizes, he's like, oh, it's a wolf. The wolf was howling, running around. I'd never seen a wolf in the wild before. So this is an amazing sight, and I could not believe it. This was probably my favorite wildlife sighting of that trip. We saw plenty of moose from the plane after that, went to other lakes, and we went to this one historic region of Lake Clark as well. And the one thing we were thinking about is the Big Five in Alaska. In terms of wildlife, what you can see mammal-wise is considered the Big Five for large mammals. This consists of grizzly bears, caribou, Dall sheep, moose, and wolf. In Lake Clark, we saw wolf and grizzly bear and moose. And then in Katmai, we saw caribou. So in those two parks together, we had seen 4 of the Big Five. Then we looked up to the top of a mountain, and we saw Dall sheep. So we saw all 5 of the main Alaskan mammals that you can see in those 2 parks, and that was really amazing. So that's really just me rambling on about how great these parks are. The mountain scenery is cool. We did a little fishing but didn't catch anything. We're not great fishers in my family, I guess, but it's a really breathtaking experience, and it's really all about the scenery for me and the wildlife. So in terms of which one's better, going through what makes each one special, scenery and wildlife are the 2 main categories here. And for the scenery, I think Lake Clark is a little more scenic. The mountains are a bit larger. There are much better lakes, I think, that you can see. And even though I'm a huge sucker for volcano-related things, I just thought Lake Clark's mountains were truly magical to look at. And even though both are beautiful, I have to give the edge to Lake Clark. For wildlife, though the brown bears are an unbelievable experience, I think seeing a wolf in Lake Clark was something special too. So these two parks for wildlife are probably both top 4 for sure. They're right with Yellowstone and Denali. So I kind of have them neck and neck for wildlife, but overall, which one is the better park? It's so tough, but I think I have to give it to Lake Clark. I did technically spend some more time here overall, but I just loved the Tenali Mountain hike, and I love the mountain scenery and the glaciers, and even though I absolutely love Katmai, and seriously considered it as the best national park when I went there at first, thought it was really right up there with Yellowstone and Denali. I think now, I like Lake Clark just slightly more. But in terms of my rankings, Lake Clark is my 4th favorite national park out of 61, keeping in mind over 50 of those are really good. And also Katmai is number 5, so it's very close, but I think Lake Clark is the best national park of these two, and absolutely one of the best national parks in the world. And finally, I've reviewed Katmai and Lake Clark. Now I have that off my chest. Thank you for watching this park battle. If you have any questions about these parks, comment down below, and also subscribe to the channel so you know when new park battles come out. I have a lot of matchups on the way. If you have any suggestions for new park battles, let me know. I'll see you next time.